Welcome, everyone. Just going to give you another 30 seconds to a minute to join, but very excited to see everyone for our September AuthorConnect Chat. We're very excited, kicking off the fall. I'm Carlin. I'm Carlin Hickson. I work with authors, publishers, agents, speakers bureaus, publicists, marketers, sales reps, editors, and other incredible industry partners here at BookPal, where we believe books ignite continuous learning and growth. We will be talking about the topic of focus in one of our guests' latest books today, and also we'll have a Q&A with him, so please do feel free to jump in with any questions below in the chat box or in the Q&A section. As with every AuthorConnect chat, please do feel free to stay on until the end because 3 lucky winners will be receiving a free signed copy of our guest's book, Management Mess to Leadership Success. A quick reminder just to keep yourself muted today during the presentation. And again, please do feel free to put questions in at any time. As always, we will be following up next week with the recording to all attendees. We invited our guest today not only because we absolutely love his book, Management Mess to Leadership Success, but we believe now more than ever, it is critically important to reassess and pivot whenever, wherever, and however needed. Our guest today serves as FranklinCovey's Executive Vice President of Thought Leadership, and he hosts the largest and fastest growing podcast newsletter devoted to leadership development. It's called On Leadership. You should all sign up. Make sure not to miss it. He is also the author of the multi-week Amazon #1 new release and 2019 Owl Award winner in leadership, Management Mess to Leadership Success, 30 Challenges to Become the Leader You Would Follow, as well as the Wall Street Journal bestseller, Everyone Deserves a Great Manager, the 6 Critical Practices for Leading a Team. Scott is a leadership columnist for Inc.com, and he previously worked for the Disney Development Company. He lives in Salt Lake City with his wife and 3 sons, and he's served under the tutorage of Dr. Stephen R. Covey for close to 2 decades as a sales producer and a sales leader. Please join me in welcoming Scott Miller.
Carlin, I am honored to be here. Thank you for the platform today. Hello to everyone that's joining us. Delighted that you chose to take 30 minutes to invest in your own leadership skills. Hopefully some of my mistakes can translate in the next 30 minutes into your successes, or when I say mistakes, I mean messes, right? Because the book, of course, is Management Mess to Leadership Success. I want to first thank my friends at BookPal for featuring me today. I don't know if everybody caught it, but Carlin mentioned that Management Mess to Leadership Success was up as a candidate to win one of the prestigious Owl Awards, Outstanding Works of Literature Award, against some amazing books in the leadership category last year. And I don't know how, but it was bestowed upon me. I got this award, which is awesome. I carry it everywhere I go, in restaurants, to church, on planes. Nowhere does the Owl Award not join me on. My boys love this, and the new edition of the book actually has the award on it. So I just want to thank BookPal for being a great, abundant supporter of authors and readers, recognizing the hard work we put into when we kind of pour our lives and our experience into our books. I'm honored to be here today with you. The format that Carlin and I agreed upon was I would talk maybe extemporaneously for the first 15 minutes or so about why I wrote the book, what some of the insights are that you can learn from, and then if you have questions, I'm happy to do my best to address them in the last half. So first, I'm here today on the On Leadership set. As Carlin mentioned, I am privileged to be a 25-year associate inside the FranklinCovey company, of course, co-founded by Dr. Stephen R. Covey, who wrote the seminal book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. That book, can you believe, is in its 30th year. It sold 40 million copies. You can buy all of your team members a copy of that book through BookPal.com. We'd love it if you would support BookPal. And we love that they've been a great partner in helping make that book one of the most famous best-selling business books of all time. I served as the chief marketing officer in the firm for 8 years, and about 2 years became an author, speaker, and now the host of what is the world's largest leadership podcast, which I'm on today, called On Leadership with Scott Miller. Now, before I started hosting the podcast, I came to realize that my leadership career, like most of ours, was kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, right? You don't become a leader of people very easily. And I made lots of messes in my career. And as I began to kind of transition to the next phase of my career and life, being a father, being a parent, being a husband, being an author, a speaker, I decided that I wanted to share a lot of the messes that I had experienced, because leadership's tough. Leadership of people is not for everyone. In fact, that's kind of the premise of the book, is that not everyone should be a leader of people. In fact, I'll tell you a secret. I'm not sure I should have been a leader of people. Just like not everyone should be an anesthesiologist. Not everyone should be a dental hygienist or a commercial airline pilot. Not everyone should be a leader of people. It takes a very certain kind of person to want to rise to the relentless, sometimes unrewarding demands that requires of those of us who are leaders. But if you are going to be a leader of people, then there are 30 challenges that all of us are going to face in our careers. And that's the crux of the book. The book, as we mentioned, is called Management Mess to Leadership Success, 30 Challenges to Become the Leader You Would Follow. And I didn't make these 30 challenges up. Now, I failed at most of them, but the fact of the matter is FranklinCovey has been a 40-year-long leadership development firm, helping literally hundreds of millions of leaders become better leaders. And I guess forcing a few out where that wasn't the right path for them. But after being in the firm myself for 25 years, I learned that each of us will face these 30 things no matter where we are in our career. So I decided to write a story about each of them, typically when I'd failed, when it was a mess for me, and some of the things that you could do differently, say differently, how you would act differently, how you could think differently to avoid these 30 messes that in most cases I found myself tripping up in, injuring people's self-esteem, wrecking people's self-worth. I'm not proud of that. I don't share that freely. But what I do believe is that vulnerability is a leadership competency. Just like communication, just like self-awareness, just like reading a P&L, vulnerability is a leadership competency. Just like humility is a leadership competency. And for most of you who know me or follow me on social media, you know that humility is not my strong suit. Humble leaders, to quote Dr. Covey, are more concerned about what is right than being right. I love to be right. I'm not a naturally humble person, which is why of the 30 challenges, demonstrate humility was the first one, because it's hard to be a leader moving from mess to success if you're not capable of being humble. Let me tell you, one of the first lessons I've learned on my leadership journey is that humility flows from confidence. Kind of counterintuitive, that confident leaders can be humble leaders. It's arrogant leaders that are incapable of demonstrating humility. So like that, I share in the opening story of the book some outrageous, like unbelievable stories around how I lacked every possible gene associated with demonstrating humility. Because I always thought leadership was about being loud and charismatic and persuasive. I thought great leaders were always in influence mode, sales mode, persuasion mode. Perhaps some of that is true, but you can't be a humble leader if you're always talking, if you're always selling, if you're always persuading, because humility is really about being empathetic. It's about loving your team, about caring about people more than even you care about yourself. It's about caring about their successes, their careers, their income, their contribution, their capability, their capacity, their brand. So I came to that late in my career. Now the book is outrageously funny. I mean it to be, a raw, relatable leadership book. And some of you may be asking, did the world really need more leadership books? Yes, they needed one more. What they needed was Management Mess to Leadership Success, because I think of all the wonderful books that are behind me, of which there's 250 on the set, most leadership books are written either through executives in Fortune 500 companies, of which I am a chief marketing officer in a large company, or they're written by academics who, quite frankly, have great ideas, but they've actually never fired someone or hired someone or talked to somebody about their personal hygiene or talked to somebody about their communication skills or their collaboration skills. That's what leadership's about, having tough conversations where you balance courage with diplomacy, where you listen with empathy off of your own agenda, off of your own timeline, moving on to somebody else's agenda, and truly listening so that you can genuinely understand what it is they're going through. So I share in the book 30, 40 kind of hilarious stories, some that are kind of blush-worthy, like you said that, you still work there. You know what? I'm the recipient of a lot of great mentorship and leadership throughout my career. And that's how I came to be able to write this book. So I'm going to teach you a couple of things in the next maybe 5 minutes that I have left before Carlin takes your questions. I made every mistake in the book. So if you have any questions on things you're dealing with, I'd be happy to answer them. Let me tell you some of the big ideas that I translate into the book. And most of them aren't my own ideas. Most of them are wise bits of nuggets that I share from our co-founders, Dr. Stephen R. Covey or Hiram Smith, or people that authored great books inside the firm like The Speed of Trust, or The 4 Disciplines of Execution, or Everyone Deserves a Great Manager, or Get Better. Here's what I've learned. As a leader, you have to understand that your number one job is to build and create culture. That culture is not something elusive. Culture is just as important as inventory turns and gross revenue and EBITDA and supply chain and SG&A. That culture is palpable because people don't quit their jobs. People quit bad leaders and corrupt cultures. And that culture is why people come to organizations, and it's why they flee. That culture is everything. It's all dependent on the leader. The leader creates culture in every conversation, every text, every email, every Zoom call, every conversation. Culture is built or destroyed in every interaction. And as a leader, your job is to build culture. And I think too often we're led to believe this HR adage that people are an organization's most valuable asset. That's not true. Let me debunk that. People are not an organization's most valuable asset. It's rather the relationships between those people that are your company's competitive advantage. Because Carlin can have a Black Belt Master Six Sigma certification, and Scott can be a Rhodes Scholar from Oxford. But if Carlin and Scott can't get along, if we can't forgive each other, if we can't pre-forgive each other, if we can't compliment each other, BookPal doesn't need us. It's those relationships, and the leader is responsible for making sure that everybody is forgiving, pre-forgiving, collaborating, that you have a non-fear culture where it's safe to admit your mistakes. It's safe because the leader admits their own mistakes. That the leader is vulnerable enough, confident enough, humble enough to say, you know what, let me tell you about what I did. Let me tell you about the mistake that I made. Let me tell you about the project that I failed on. Now, this doesn't mean you license bad behavior, but as a leader, when you own your mess, you make it safe for others to own theirs. And that's what you want as a leader. You want a culture where everybody owns their mess, where they freely admit their mistakes, where they freely take responsibility for their own actions, where they're not living in fear of hiding it or delaying it or foisting it upon you at the last minute when it's too late for you to solve it, right? It's too late for you to make up the contract that fell apart because the person was hiding it from you. Let me tell you, as a leader, if your people are lying to you, that says more about you than it does about them. Because that means you've not made it safe in a culture for people to tell you the truth about their mistakes, about a miss in the budget, about a missed forecast in the pipeline. Because as a leader, your job is to receive bad news all day long. That is your job. Now, I don't tolerate wrong news. There's a difference between bad news and wrong news. Bad news is what happens all day long. My job is to help you solve that. Wrong news means you're making it up. You didn't do your research. You didn't do your homework. You were guessing. And so one of the leader's challenges is helping people understand the difference between wrong news and bad news, creating a culture where it's safe to own your mess, where it's safe to stretch your skills, where it's safe to make big bets. So that gives you some example of some of the challenges in the book. The challenges are organized, Carlin, into 3 sections. The first 8 or so are around leading yourself. The next dozen or so are around leading others. And the last 8 or 10, if you will, are around getting results. Some good examples are around listening better, having an abundance mentality, being loyal to the absent. One of Dr. Covey's most profound insights was around this idea of developing relationships. He wrote a book that I quote frequently in my book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. My time is almost up here, but I want to get this concept apart. I think the big gift that I've given readers in my book is learning from all of my messes, which are many. And one of my biggest messes was not understanding the difference between being effective and being efficient. Listen carefully. The book was called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, written by Dr. Covey. It wasn't called The 7 Habits of Highly Efficient People, that a lot of journalists and editors get wrong by mistake, because there is a difference between having an effective mindset and having an efficient mindset. Final minute. I'm a very efficient person, as you can tell. I have high energy, I have a lot of passion, I love checklists, I love getting things done. I'm that annoying neighbor that on Saturday, I wake up at 5 o'clock, I go to Home Depot, the flowers are bought, they're planted by 6 o'clock, the yard's raked by 7 o'clock, the yard's mowed by 8 o'clock, the car's washed by 9 o'clock, I'm ready to go. I love getting things done. I'm a very efficient person, and quite frankly, it's a strength that has given me a lot of my professional success. My bandwidth is pretty remarkable. The problem is people like me that have efficiency as their go-to strength, we make the mistake of using that same efficiency mindset in our relationships with people, with our spouse, with our mother-in-law, with our colleagues, with our boss. We're kind of always anxious. We're always on to the next thing. We're ready to move. No. Dr. Covey said with people, slow is fast and fast is slow. So one of the lessons that I teach is the power of knowing when to be efficient, projects, email, texting, social media, and when to be effective, when to slow down, when to take off your glasses, turn off your phone, close your laptop, and really check in, because as a leader, your top job is to build a high trust culture. We have strong relationships where people can bring their best self to work. It's a mess that a lot of people like me that bring their efficiency mindset into relationships. There's almost never an occasion when being efficient is better than slowing down and being effective with people, when that's better. Unless you declare it, right? Sometimes I will say, hey, Carlin, can we just have a 3-minute, very efficient conversation? I'm not gonna ask about the weather, I'm not gonna ask about your shingles, I'm not gonna ask you about the project, I just wanna ask you about this issue right here. That's okay, as long as it isn't your go-to strategy. So you get the big picture. I share 30 messes, 40 messes across my long career in the hopes that all of you can kind of step around it and move to success quicker. So with that fire hydrant, Carlin, I'll turn the time back to you and take any questions you or today's guests may have.
I love it. You touched on so many elements from reading your book. I had read it last fall, obviously, for the Owl Awards, but reading it again more recently, so many gems, such authenticity, such vulnerability throughout. And I think, honestly, like you said, I mean, there are so many leadership books out there that your book really does focus on real applicable things that people face every day, whether they're a new leader or a leader that's been in business for 20, 30 years. I think I'd like to start off just with kind of just asking a little bit more about that. I mean, how, and I guess, you know, you talk about all the different messes that you kind of probably learned through experience, but when you did become a leader, what was kind of your first thought of how am I going to become a better leader? Was it, you know, finding the right mentor, reading books, or I guess where does that journey start for someone and for you?
Yeah, that was not one of my first thoughts. One of my first thoughts was not to become a better leader. It was, okay, so how do I get them to do it my way? How do I turn them into doing everything the way that I think it should be done? I would be disingenuous if I said my first leadership quest was to improve. No, my first leadership quest was to dominate, control, and turn everybody into my mini-me. And of course, in the book, I tell you how well that went. Quite frankly, it took me some time, way too much time, to really realize what is the role of a leader. That to be a leader, you come to realize that your job is to get work done with and through other people. And Carla, that took me a long time. As a leader, your job is to get work done with and through others. And you can't do that if you don't slow down. You can't do that if you're not a coach, a mentor. You can't do that if you're more focused on the spotlight being on you versus on them. If you're focused on your career versus their career. When you realize that your job is to get work done with and through others, you coach, you mentor, you build capability. You realize that relationships are everything, that there are other ways to accomplish it that are just as good as yours. In fact, in most cases, they might even be better. And so I would be disingenuous if I said my first quest was to be a better leader. That's not true. But to answer your question, as I matured, I really matured through reading a book that you all promote and that people ought to buy through bookpal.com, which is Multipliers by Liz Wiseman. I think this is perhaps the best leadership book ever written, where Liz Wiseman talks about how a leader's job is not to be the genius in the room, but rather the genius maker of others. That is your job. I mean, I love this book. I like to be abundant. I like to promote other authors. This book is a remarkable book. You can buy it on BookPal today. I think it's a great book written by Liz Wiseman. It's changed my leadership style. This is really, Harlan, when I began to move from being a mess to success, when I read Liz's book and really understood that, oh, my job is to build capacity in others, not just kind of muddle through my own messes.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's so true. I mean, like you said, it's everything is relationship based, not just externally with like customers, clients and partners, but internally. And like you said, if you're not working well with colleagues or with people who report to you, I mean, that's where the mess and the fixing and this mess to success needs to start. So you mentioned this in your chat just a couple minutes ago, the pre-forgiveness culture, which I love. And I've never really heard anyone talk about that before. How would you say, and I'm sure a lot of organizations maybe struggle with this, but how would you say an organization could start to build this if they don't already have this culture?
Right, so let's talk about the leader, because the leader is the linchpin in any culture, whether it be the CEO or the CFO or the director of product development or the manager of the call center, right? So there are cultures inside organizations, there are cultures inside teams. There's cultures inside platforms and divisions. So my point would be with leaders, recognize that you control the culture you're in. You do, by being the model. So if you're gossiping, that's the culture. If you're tardy, that's the culture. If you obfuscate and spin and posture and position, that's the culture. So if you want to build a culture on your team of forgiveness and pre-forgiveness, you have to model that. Now, this idea isn't original to me. This idea came from my mentor at FranklinCovey named Chuck Farnsworth. He was the vice president of the education division. He hired me into the company when I left the Disney company. And I'd never heard the concept before, like pre-forgiven, what's that? Well, Chuck wanted to create a culture where empowerment wasn't a buzzword, it was a theme. And he said to us all, you're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna quote the wrong price. You're gonna abuse the return policy. You're going to make mistakes. Do me the courtesy of not doing it deliberately, but you're going to drop the ball. And he didn't want us to have a fear-based culture. He wanted us to have an unleashed, empowered, creative culture. So Chuck gave us some parameters, right? If you make a mistake, you can fix it up to $500. We were salespeople. But beyond $500, you need to involve me, meaning Chuck. And I just saw my own fear, my own paranoia, my own excitement just, melt away and blossom when I got into this idea of pre-forgiveness. And when he made it safe to make mistakes, people didn't go out and make more mistakes. They made less mistakes because they didn't want to cash in that chit. They didn't want to disappoint Chuck. They didn't want to have the report be that they'd made $500 corrections this quarter, right? They wanted to make one or two or none. Everybody's standard raised because we didn't want to disappoint Chuck. And the amount of creativity and thoughtfulness and deliberateness that happened, not only did it not create more allowances, it actually lessened all the problems because everybody wanted to value and appreciate the idea of this pre-forgiveness culture. I think as a leader, that's an important job. Admit your mistakes up front. I can tell you some doozies that I made. And I walked into the CEO, and the CEO of FranklinCovey said, sit down. Let me tell you one. And then he told me about a mistake he made that was 5 times bigger than mine. And that didn't make it any less easier. It just made me realize I don't want to disappoint him again. I'm going to do better at this research or this due diligence or this contract or whatever it is. So I think FranklinCovey is a great place when it comes to not licensing bad behavior or licensing mistakes, but recognizing we're all on a growth path. And when your leader makes that safe, you communicate, share ideas, ask questions, not live in fear, people choose to stay and they choose to stay engaged. Let me share one last thought. Because another HR adage, Carlin, that's not true, leaders do not create engagement. You hear that all the time now. Leaders do not create engagement. Leaders create the conditions for others to choose their own level of engagement, high or low. And as a leader, you should be asking yourself, am I creating the conditions? Am I creating the culture where people choose to bring their most creativity, their most abundance, the facts, the truth, their fears, their passions, all of it? Because everybody's bringing their whole life to work now, right? Gone are the days where you bring your personal life and you bring your professional life. Everybody's bringing their whole life to work, and that's the reality. And it's a leader's job to embrace that, not be their psychiatrist, not be their financial advisor, but to recognize it's safe to bring your whole self to work. And we love you. We want you to grow. And I'm creating a culture where you can do that. It's a high standard. You're going to fall down, lots of messes, but I think it's a great platform. It's a great goal to have as a leader.
I absolutely agree. And I've definitely heard that, bring your whole self to work idea.
Now.
I think, honestly, I don't know any other way to be, especially I think in the COVID time period.
That's because you didn't live in the 70s and 80s. That's why.
There we go. Yeah, no.
Where no one was bringing their whole self to work. Trust me.
No one? Oh, interesting. Okay.
Oh my
Well,
gosh.
how would you, this is a little bit of a pivot, but somewhat related just because we are kind of bringing our whole selves to work, especially in the COVID era of, telework, remote work, and trying to maintain social distance, but still be productive. What would you say is the best advice for people trying to continue to have that balance, work-life balance, as well as do what they need to do remotely right now?
It's kind of the same advice. As a leader, own your mess. Because when you own your mess, you make it safe for others, right? I have 3 boys, 6, 8, and 10 with my wife. They're running around with their underwear on swords. They're fighting each other. They're pulling the plug and they're creeping in the video. It's life now, right? As a leader, you got to keep some semblance of professionalism, but make it safe for people to acknowledge their own fears and their own concerns, right? People are going to have issues that are fundamentally different. Not everybody is going to deal with this change at the same rate that you might. So as a leader, recognize that change is a highly emotional process. And as a champion of that, you have to recognize and make it safe for people to come to the change differently. And as a leader, you got to change your paradigm because your job is to check in, not check on. And when you're checking on people, they know it. When you're checking in with people, they know it. They feel it. There's a difference. So whenever you're as the leader, you're hosting a Zoom call or a Teams call or a Skype call or whatever it is, Zoom call, remind yourself, I'm checking in, I'm not checking on. And people know the difference, and you'll create a level of engagement and vulnerability and transparency. If you tell people, so tell me, how's it going? Let me tell you about my day. My kids are everywhere. My internet's down. This is happening. I'm stressed. Don't make it about you, but make it safe for others to be who they are. People want leaders they can relate to. That doesn't mean you lower your standard. Doesn't mean you become their best friend. It means you're judicious about building a culture where people can bring their whole self, especially in this pandemic where everybody is panicked, right? Is their job safe? How are they going to pay their bills? Is their mother-in-law safe? Is my kid's school getting shut down? When is the next shoe going to drop? Is the vaccine going to be rushed? Is it going to work? I mean, everybody's got legitimate horror issues going on in our lives. Mm-hmm. Not everybody's in the same boat, but everybody's in the same storm. And the more you can empathize with the boat your team members are in, because it may be different than the boat that you're in, the more they will cleave around you.
I love that advice. And I love the idea of checking in, not checking on. That's so subtle, but strong and powerful.
That's why I'm such an amazing genius author of the book, Management Mess, that won the OWL Award.
No, everybody does really need to get this book. Well, I guess with that, I mean, I do have one final kind of question thought. You tie up the Challenge 30 with such great advice that you say you pulled from the Speed of Trust, and it's just different aspects for people to keep in mind when they're getting better, which are committing to continuous improvement, increasing your capabilities, be a constant learner, love that, develop feedback systems, and act upon the feedback you receive. Are there any other additional thoughts, or I just want to make sure that people know that they should be signing up, for your podcast and where they should go to do that as well?
Sure. I mean, I want you to read my book and buy my book today. I want you to read Liz Wiseman's book. I want you to listen to my podcast. I want you to read my Inc. column. But the advice I give in the book, which you touched on, stop reading my book. Go write your own book. Stop listening to my podcast. Go host your own podcast. Stop reading my Inc. article. Go write your own Inc. article. Make your own. I mean, I think everybody's got wisdom, right? Go post your own LinkedIn post and move outside your comfort zone. Stop going to a conference. Host your own damn conference. I think that everybody's got wisdom and value. And if I would have thought I was going to write a best-selling book, or now multiple best-selling books, I have new books coming out next year called Marketing Mess to Brand Success. It's second in the Mess to Success series. You can buy it soon on bookpal.com. I have a new series coming out called Master Mentors, but you should as well. Take control of your own vehicles. It costs $2 to host a podcast. Buy a microphone. I really encourage all of your listeners today to don't just consume, produce, create, distribute, because you've got great wisdom as well. That's part of your own professional development. If you would have listened to my first couple of podcasts, you probably wouldn't follow me anymore. I'm at 150 now. If you would have listened to my first radio program on iHeartRadio, you would have been horrified, right? But I put myself out there. I took some risks. I owned my mess. I got better and better. And that's my advice to all your listeners and viewers today. Own your mess. Be confident. Don't care about the haters. There are blog sites dedicated to my hair. There's blog sites dedicated to my glasses. Some people hate me. Some people love me. Haters gonna hate, right? Go with your strengths. Know who your posse is. And don't just consume, produce, and distribute as well.
I love it. Such great advice, and just so thankful that you had the time to be with us today. We are grateful. We love your book. We can't wait for your new books in 2021. Yes, 2019 Owl Award winner. We do have 3 winners today for the signed copies. So congratulations to Colin Dixon, Heidi Magan, and Julie Moore. We will definitely be reaching out to get your best mailing address, and then we will make sure you get those copies. We will be sending out the recording for this webinar chat next week, so do stay tuned. And our next AuthorConnect chat will be on October 6th at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, where we'll be chatting with Adrian Gostick and Chester Elton about their book, Leading with Gratitude.
Chester and Adrian are good friends of mine. That book is awesome.
Oh.
Those guys are amazing and super abundant. What a great selection.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And thank you, Scott. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. My honor. Own your mess.
Yes. All right. Bye, everybody.